My name is Maha Sajid, and I will be presenting a paper on understanding security attacks in remote collaborative mixed reality, co-authored by Ibrahim Bukhari, Dr. Boji, and Dr. Brendan David John. Our focus on this area of research is inspired by many factors. Firstly, increased connectivity and sensor reliance in MR devices have introduced new security risks. They have also created a new digital space that users don't fully understand. Also, collaborative MR is being rapidly adopted in fields like healthcare, education, and engineering. Imagine a surgeon or consultant relying on MR for remote guidance, and their interactions are subtly manipulated. That small manipulation can cause serious consequences. Collaboration in MR can either be co-located or remote. For the scope of this paper, we focus on remote collaborations, which can expose users to various security threats, such as network reliability issues, misattribution of attacks, and interaction manipulation. Previous research has identified vulnerabilities in MR, including perceptual manipulation attacks, side channel attacks, identity verification issues, and data privacy concerns. This table summarizes prior work on user perceptions of security attacks. Some of these studies explore collaborative MR, a few of which specifically address remote collaboration. However, these remote collaborative studies do not test user perceptions on headsets using deployed attacks. Our study is the first to implement and evaluate security attacks in a remote collaborative MR setting. In summary, we implemented novel security attacks in MR environment, such as click redirection attack, object occlusion attack, and spatial occlusion attack. We also identified the user challenges associated with recognizing attacks and gap between users' perceived and actual mitigation strategies in response to these attacks. Our threat model is based on multiple users interacting through a network remote MR system where malicious entities can manipulate the virtual environment to disrupt collaboration. We assumed that MR applications in the future will allow third-party integrations similar to other IoT devices such as Alexa skills. This assumption draws on existing platforms such as VRChat, which enable third-party integrations through platforms such as Open Sound Control that can access sensor data. This can give attackers the capability of accessing and manipulating virtual elements in the environment. Now let's move on to our research questions. Our first research question states that how do user concerns towards security attacks change when exposed to attacks that are exclusive to remote collaborative MR environments? Secondly, how do users perform in recognizing security attacks in remote collaborative MR environment and what are their mitigation strategies? And finally, how are user experience and collaboration affected in presence of MR security attacks? We classified our implemented attacks into two main categories, familiar and unfamiliar. Familiar attacks such as click redirection refer to the attacks that are inspired by attacks in traditional 2D computing but are adapted for MR. Before the start of experiment, we reminded participants of the common cybersecurity attacks in 2D computing to ensure this familiarity. Whereas unfamiliar attacks such as object and spatial occlusion are attacks that are exclusive to MR as they rely on spatial computing properties for their execution and cannot be replicated in 2D environments. Moreover, the attacks we have implemented require minimum access as listed on the table, including head position, list of seen objects, and network vulnerabilities. I will delve deeper into the implementation of the first two attacks in the next few slides. The familiar attack, click redirection, is inspired by the web-based attack called click jacking that tricks a user into clicking a web page element which is linked to a hidden element. However, unlike traditional clickjacking, during click redirection, both objects are visible and occupy different positions in space. As it can be seen on the video on the right, when a player tries to move one object, another proxy object moves instead. This behavior can cause confusion and mistrust among collaborators, and users might unintentionally interact with a different object. For the purpose of task completion in our study, the participants could point at the proxy object and move the intended object, or ask their partner to move the object for them. Similarly, the unfamiliar attack in this case is called spatial occlusion attack. As shown in the video, this attack creates an invisible bounding box that blocks raycast interactions within a designated region. The video on the right illustrates the box, but during an actual attack, it remains invisible, while the object inside stays visible. Traditional 2D interfaces lack the depth and the spatial interactions needed for such an attack. This restriction on user interaction can cause confusion and disrupt workflows. Possible mitigation for the user is to physically enter the bounded space and move the object, or ask their partner to move the object for them. During our user study, 20 participants assembled a rocket ship from puzzle pieces while collaborating with their partners using the SurfShare toolkit. Participants were located in separate rooms connected remotely via Microsoft HoloLens 2 headsets. Each participant received 3 out of 6 pieces needed to complete the task. They had to collaborate to bring all pieces together to form the target shape under base and attack conditions. We adopted a mixed method approach to evaluate user behaviors when exposed to these attacks. For our analysis, we used the following evaluation metrics. For our first research question regarding users' concerns, we used MRC questionnaire and semi-structured interview. For our second research question regarding attack recognition and mitigation, we used open-ended feedback and observational analysis. And finally, for our third research question regarding user experience and collaboration, we used task completion time, NASA TLX, system usability scale, and self-rated performance. Moving on to the results. We noticed that many users incorrectly classify security threats as either technological glitches or user errors. More than 50% participants reported no attack in spatial occlusion condition, whereas 32% participants reported no attack in click redirection condition. We also noticed that 12% of the participants were able to describe the behavior of click redirection attack accurately, whereas no participant could do the same for spatial occlusion attack. This shows that MR-exclusive attacks are harder to recognize than traditional attacks. This also raises an important question about how do users actually respond to these attacks and do their mitigation strategies align with their stated perceptions. Interestingly, while some mitigation strategies were effective, we noticed a significant gap between what users believed they were doing and their actual responses. Majority participants failed to report their mitigation techniques, especially for spatial occlusion attack, where 67% of participants reported that they did not use any mitigation, despite the fact that in reality 62% of participants did rely on near interaction, with the rest either recreating the object or asking their partner to mitigate this attack. In summary, MR-specific attacks show a larger gap between reported and actual mitigation techniques than the traditional attacks. As mentioned before, the participants filled out a NASA TLX questionnaire after each condition. Upon comparing different subscales of NASA TLX, we noticed that click redirection attack caused significantly higher frustration than spatial occlusion attack, making click redirection a more noticeable attack than the spatial occlusion attack. This result further reinforced that spatial occlusion is a subtle attack that was harder to notice but can still be dangerous. Our subjective analysis revealed that different attacks influence collaboration differently. Click redirection usually encouraged collaboration, whereas spatial occlusion led to mistrust. In some cases, even when participants explained to their partners multiple times that they weren't responsible for unexpected movements, their partners did not believe them and said things like, "Everything has changed, please stop moving objects and just stop doing everything for now." We also noticed that attack recognition shapes user response. When users did not recognize an attack, they misattributed. For instance, one user thought they were not able to use air tap right during spatial occlusion attack due to their own user error. Moreover, collaborative setting also influence recognition rate. As one of the participants reported, "Alone, I know if something changes, it's an attack. But with a partner, I have two suspects now, the attack or my partner." In conclusion, the main takeaways from our study are the following. MR security threats are subtle but impactful. Moreover, there is a gap between perception and reality of mitigation techniques, where users unintentionally rely on workarounds rather than deliberate security actions. And finally, MR specific security attacks can affect trust among the collaborators. The future work of this study should focus on expanding novel attack types. It is also important to examine discrepancies in user perceptions and develop security solutions. Thank you for listening. Feel free to contact us at the following email addresses. I would also like to acknowledge the support of the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative and Virginia Tech Institute for Creativity, Arts, and Technology on this research.